Hi everybody, welcome to Leading for Life Stories Season 2. My name is Bob Judson and I'm your host for this podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you here joining me. Thanks very much, and I really hope you enjoy what follows. Welcome back everybody. Well, this week I thought I would talk about technology. Why do I want to talk about technology on a leadership-focused podcast? Well, because technology, I think, is increasingly important in leadership roles because you're going to use it in kind of all facets of your life, really, and therefore having a grip on what you use, how you use it, when you use it, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, what kind do you need, all that sort of thing. Where do you want the preparation? All those sorts of areas I think are interesting. And the catalyst for doing this particular episode was two things that happened in the past week. One was my personal computer. I normally use an iMac. It's a little bit older. It's about 7 years or so old, and it just died terminally. Couldn't even boot it up, and everything I have on it at home was on it, but also luckily all saved to either OneDrive or to the iCloud. So that's a good thing. We'll come back to that in a minute. And I also have a laptop, luckily, so I'm able to record this onto my laptop, and we'll talk more about redundancy and so on in a little while as well. So that was the first thing that happened, was a bit of a technological headache, just in terms of having to sort getting a new computer and think about how that's all going to work, and I haven't got it yet. But the other one was I was actually over in Paris last week, exactly a week ago, when the Crowdstrike event happened, and obviously affected a lot of IT globally. On anything that was depending on Microsoft was badly affected by it. I was at Deloitte University, where I am regularly, and we lost a lot of capability. We lost all our ability to project things and to use most of the systems that were there. Luckily, on the course we were facilitating, it didn't matter because the course relies very little on IT. It's you've got very few slides, and even the ones that are there are entirely kind of optional. So again, not that big an impact, but it could have been a much bigger impact. And I thought it was therefore a useful thing to just think about as a thematic option on what leaders need to think about vis-a-vis technology, and in a world where we are increasingly dependent on it and increasingly using it for productivity, opportunity, but also to some extent bringing with it a bunch of challenges around too much usage, addiction, if you like, unwillingness to dispense with it, as absolute dependence on using it all the time. Those things add to the challenges for leaders and for teams working for leaders. So I thought it was potentially quite a useful time to talk about some of the pitfalls, but also some of the opportunities and some of the things in my personal view that are worth considering in the context of technology. And I'm going to break it really down into a couple of chunks. I think that there's a computers piece and IT generally. There's a microphones and audio presentation type piece as well that goes with that, and we need to think then about what that means for a lot of other things as well, including the future with AI, etc. So let's start by talking about computers and IT. And I guess the first point is, what do you have, and what do you need? Is it what you need? Do you need something different, more powerful, more storage, more memory, whatever? And most importantly, probably, do you know how to use it well? What software do you use? Do you understand how it works? How capable are you of making sure that you can get the best out of what you have? Because if you don't have the right equipment, that's a problem to start with. If you don't have the right software, that's obviously exacerbating that. And actually, if you're like an awful lot of people and you have both the right equipment and probably the right software, but you really don't know how to use it, then you're not setting yourself up for success in the way that you might do, because your personal productivity is going to be limited by what you can do with the capability you have. So if you're starting to learn a new software package, or indeed it's one that you've been using for years, but actually you think you could improve, find ways to improve. Find ways to turn around and upskill yourself by challenging yourself, whether it's, let's pick an example, Microsoft Excel, used very widely by an awful lot of people. most people, a bit like a washing machine, it's got thousands of programs on it. You probably use about 4 or 5. Excel's exactly the same. It's got a huge amount of capability that I suspect the vast majority of users use a tiny percentage of. And that's fine. That doesn't matter at all. The point being that, make sure when you are doing something, stretch yourself. Try and find the opportunity to do something that improves your knowledge of how you can actually use that particular program or that particular device, so that you're getting better progressively in terms of your own capability. Because you want, as a leader, to be able to turn around and lead by example well, and not be completely dependent on people in your team who may have greater skill than you with individual things, but you want to necessarily be able to show that you've got appropriate skills and you're putting the right amount of effort into ensuring that you have that knowledge and you're willing to learn, develop, etc., just as you're expecting them to do. And in terms of looking at the types of software that's there, there is obviously a great risk that things are out of date the moment you buy them with the IT world, and also that there's always something better on the shelf. And you just need to think about, what do I actually need? How much is enough? Am I going to get value from having a super high end computer, or is it actually beyond what I really need? Certainly, I've done both things in the past. I've ended up buying something that was more than I needed. I've also ended up buying something that kind of I've regretted a little bit. And a good example at the moment would be my personal MacBook that I'm recording this podcast on right now, where I bought a pretty basic spec one in terms of storage capacity and so on, because I thought, no, it's fine. It was really only for when I go away and I'm going to be doing a limited amount of things with it, and therefore I don't need it to have a lot of direct capability. Now, I actually wish with hindsight that I had got something with bigger storage capacity and so on, because I'm finding it quite limiting when I do take it away in terms of what I can actually run on it. I'm running out of disk space, and fine, I can add on external disk space, etc., but that just is more stuff to lug around and is a bit of a pain. So thinking about what you have and have you got enough, and how future-proofed is it? You don't want to be in a relentless cycle of having to upgrade stuff very, very regularly, obviously. But at the same time, you've got to be realistic that computers do move on, and it's not going to last forever when you do have it. So having the kind of a sensible head on, I suppose, with that is important. You need to think as well about your own redundancy with this. So as I had this week, when my main computer fell over, had I not had a laptop, it would have been particularly painful. I would have been reliant on iPad, iPhone, etc. to do absolutely everything. And whilst they're very capable bits of kit these days, they don't do absolutely everything. And so when you're trying to do either this sort of thing, record a podcast, or you're making a presentation, or you're even producing documents that you need to send off that need to look professional, etc., you're probably going to need something that is a bit beyond a phone in order to be able to do that. So again, think about how you manage that. How much is enough? What's your ability to turn around and have instant access to more capability, alternative capability if you need it? And to some extent, you can't mitigate everything. I mean, if you're away on the road somewhere and your laptop falls over and that's all you've got, well, that's you've just got to deal with it, and you've just got to adapt to the situation. And often that is perfectly possible. You can turn around, hopefully, and think about using printed copies for a presentation if you needed to do that. Send it on somewhere else ahead of time. All these things are pretty obvious and basic, so people have your presentation even if your IT doesn't work on the day. But you do need to make sure you've thought about that. And if I facilitate a lot in different venues, trying to make sure that you're there with enough time and with enough forward planning to know what is going to be available. If I'm wanting to present a presentation, is the right kit going to be available for me on the day? What's the room setup look like? Does the projector actually, is it big enough? Is it a TV or is it a screen? What's the room size? Do I need sound? If so, how am I going to make that work? Do I need internet access? Often a challenge. If you're going in as an external facilitator to another company, getting onto their Wi-Fi with your computer may well be a challenge. And so, making sure you can do all of those things in advance before you embarrass yourself on the day, very, very important. And obviously testing and making sure your own hardware is as you want it to be, as up to date as it can be. Making sure you're not going to end up with it saying, I need to update myself, halfway through your presentation is really a good thing. So all of those kind of fairly obvious bits are there, but they're important, and I think you need to continue to think about those. I think as well, think about your use of other technology in a venue. So if you're going somewhere, I said I'd talk about microphones and things as well, making sure that you think about your ability versus what's actually available to you to speak. So if you're going to speak in a big auditorium, usually pretty obviously you'll need to be wearing a microphone of some sort. If you're speaking in a reasonably big room, you may think, I've got a good enough voice, I can carry the room and it's going to be absolutely fine. But the reality may be that people do struggle to hear you at the back, and you would have been much better using aids such as microphones that are there. And again, what's there? Is it a walk around radio mic that can you can clip onto your lapel and use, or a boom mic that can attach around the back of your neck and over your ear kind of thing? All of those things are very good, very helpful, particularly if you're the kind of presenter that likes to walk around on stage. Obviously, if you're using something that's tied to a lectern, as a fixed microphone, then you are going to be tied to that lectern, and that may not suit your style. So again, being aware of that in advance, not getting caught out, very, very important to do that, and ensure that you don't stress yourself in any kind of role. If you're a leader of an organization, or even just turning around and being a facilitator for a session, you don't want to put yourself under pressure that just makes you more stressed before you even start speaking, just because something you haven't thought of or something doesn't work that you had planned on working. So, the technology is really important, and you will not always have the ability to turn around and ensure you fix everything on the on the day. You may have some support available to you from whoever whichever venue you're working in, but the more redundant you can be in terms of actually having your own kit, and when I say kit, I include everything here. If you want a pointer, take it yourself. If you want, you need power adapters to make sure you've actually got power going into your machine. You also need to make sure you've got the right kind of plug adapters if you're going somewhere particularly abroad. So you're not suddenly, hoping that someone else is going to have what you need. If you're using their IT to do something, and you're going to another part of your own organization to present or whatever, make absolutely sure in advance that your slides have made it there, your materials, whatever you're going to use, has made it there, and it's been tested and it works. If you're using video links, for example, and they need to connect to the internet, do they work? Do they look good? If you're doing an online presentation, have you actually tested it with someone else on the other end of a link, just to make sure, what does this actually look like on screen? Is it going to work? Does the proportion look right? Do my slides come over okay? Do I come over okay in terms of speaking over the top of my slides, et cetera, et cetera? The more you can do to turn around and diminish that technological risk, the more comfortable you are likely to make yourself in terms of actually your ability to deliver on the day with real effectiveness. And just before I move on to some sort of wider things here, I think thinking about new capabilities, new technology, it's very easy as a leader, I think, to kick this slightly into the long grass, to talk about artificial intelligence and go, well, do you know what? That's the younger generation are going to be doing that. I can relax and rely on them to do it. And Steve Brown, when he did a podcast with me a while ago, an AI specialist, this is what he does as a living, was very clear, and I think he's absolutely right, that it's really important for leaders to lead in this situation. You don't want to be a follower here. You want to be out there understanding, looking at the capability and experimenting with it. So finding ways to tap into what is already there and watching it grow and developing with it, if you like, and at every opportunity is really, really important. So if you've never touched ChatGPT or any form of AI tool, then now's the time to start thinking about how you might try that, because it's going to help you to be better, more credible, and more capable as a leader, because you'll have an idea not only what you can get other people to do within the team, what you can do yourself, but also potentially what you need to invest in. Where are the areas you need to turn around and think about doing more with your organization to have the right kit, the right capability to to take you to the place you want to be in terms of business delivery. So I touched on redundancy, and to some extent that's fallback plans as well. But fallback plans here are really important. Whether it's with your actual computer-based work at home, or you're going away to actually go and deliver something, having a thought: what if it goes wrong? Plan for the worst and hope for the best, because you absolutely need to be planning to turn around and make sure that you have got a decent alternative plan if something goes wrong for you, and you're not going to fall over and be completely flat-footed, even if it happens to be mid-presentation. When the power fails, obviously if you're in an online presentation, that's hopeless. You can't do anything about that. But if it's in the room and suddenly you lose the IT for whatever reason, can you carry on? Are you in a position to carry on? You absolutely should be. So make sure you have whatever notes you need. Even if you've lost your slides, what can you talk to? How can you carry the day without being completely blown away by what's actually happened? That all takes me to a kind of different section where I think about technology is a feature of our everyday lives, and nobody is kind of ignorant of that now. Everybody pretty much walks around with some form of technology, whether it's a phone or whether it's more complicated than that. And managing that well in your life and as a leader is really, really important. And thinking about how you are prioritizing human interaction versus technological interaction kind of links back to where I was last week talking about communicating with impact as well. You need to be conscious that there is a real risk in today's world of effectively becoming addicted to your phone or other device that you use, and being constantly on duty, as it were, looking at your emails, checking what's going on, and paying constant attention to that, and to the detriment of your human relationships, personal or professional. But also, you need to be very, very aware that it just looks weird. I was the other day standing in a venue. I'd actually gone to the bathroom, and I was standing there in the bathroom with two guys either side of me who were at the urinals with a phone in one hand and doing their business with the other. And you kind of go, that's too much for me. That is crazy in terms of thinking about appropriate use, timing, etc. for when you're on your phone. You really need to kind of think about how you're managing your life. I've sat in restaurants and looked at people who are sat there, just a couple of people, and often clearly in a relationship, who are sat there, but they're both on their phones. And you think, wow, I mean, that is a strange world we're in. Now, I get it. Occasionally you're going to do that. But if you're doing it too much, you need to be kind of conscious. Getting decent sleep, avoiding being in a position where you are using your phone too late into the evening or too early in the morning, or heaven forbid, even waking up and using it in the middle of the night. Be ultra conscious of these kind of things, not only for yourself and your own well-being, but also for the message you're sending to your team. And this plays back firmly to the communication piece, in terms of when you send emails, when you send messages, making sure you're not doing stuff that is essentially completely inappropriate is very, very important. Distraction is another one. I think giving yourself space as a leader to turn around and step away from your technology for a while, and not be worried about what's the latest email, what's the message that pops up. There's a real danger that even driving the car these days, you're connected to CarPlay, whatever it happens to be, and message pings up. You think, wow, I've got to listen to that immediately. And the reality is, is it that important? Personally, I find to get on an airplane without Wi-Fi, it's a blissful relief. You go and you have the flight, and actually you don't have anything for that period of time. That's really nice. I try very hard, certainly in the evening. I don't take my phone up to bed at all. The phone stays downstairs, and I leave that till the next morning. And that's my personal style, and it may not work for you, but you need to just think about what you actually do in a way that is going to work effectively for you to be able to do the best with your job, but also that is sending the right message to everyone that that you're working with. appropriate use of technology obviously is important, and being, again, aware of how you're going to do that. I mean, nearly every company, clearly, and pretty much every company I suspect, has policies where it employs people about what is appropriate use, what can they use their devices for, if they're using their personal devices at work, what they can do on a company network, etc. And making sure that you as a leader are absolutely meticulous in setting the right example and showing the way and leading by example. Don't get caught out doing anything stupid on your own device that you subsequently wish you hadn't done, where that's just deeply embarrassing and damages your personal credibility enormously with the team. If you've been found doing surfing the internet for doing a bit of web shopping when you should have been doing something else. Social media is probably the enemy of everybody on this, so I think it's a something you need to be really, really careful about, and think very hard about not only the example you set, but the behaviors you expect and articulate to your teams. So there is no doubt. So there's no question in their minds about what they can or can't do, and therefore it's crystal clear to them that they're in a position that they know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, how they should use equipment, etc. And that takes me to another section around this on security and data protection. And I think, again, it's something that any company of any size with any employees is going to have well covered. They're going to be talking about where you can take your laptop to, what kind of data you store on your laptop, how much is centrally stored on clouds, not least just in case the device itself breaks, but also so if it gets stolen or lost somewhere, that actually your minimum risk of compromise in terms of the data you're actually holding on on the device itself. And managing those kind of protection security protocols is again really key. And as a leader, again, it's really, really important that you follow those policies yourself. I mean, if you're setting the policy, then you've got to live by it too. It's not good enough for you to turn around and expect one thing off your subordinates and your people that work for you, and you do something completely different yourself. You are just as vulnerable to being caught out by whether it's a virus attack, whether it's somebody stealing your device, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to think about that. I think you also need in today's world, and this isn't really a leadership point, it's more just a personal point. I mean, if I look at my own phone, and I think how much information is on there. I mean, half my life is on my phone, really, in terms of details and contact details, my finance management, my email, a lot of my web surfing, all those sorts of things is all accessible from the phone. So being really careful with all the things I've just said about redundancy, what happens if you lose it, how well backed up is it, where have you secured your data, is it stored on something that means if you do lose the device, it's not a terminal problem. If the device breaks terminally, it's not a terminal problem. You can recover stuff. And just being conscious that particularly, we are in a world where identity theft, data theft, phishing emails, etc., are a really big problem. Thinking about your own attitudes, your own behaviors to make sure you don't compromise yourself, both in your personal life and your professional life here. Being acutely aware that stuff breaks, stuff gets stolen, stuff gets lost, and when it does, you don't want it to be a bigger drama than it needs to be, because everything should be stored somewhere else. Everything should be therefore instantly reaccessible, and you find a way through that. But equally, be sensible. Passwords, don't have the same passwords or highly predictable passwords that you're using for everything. I'm certainly, for me, what I do is I clearly do have a series of passwords. I have some that are much more complicated than others, and some that are more straightforward for things like websites that frankly I don't care about, and I don't care if someone actually has that password, because if all it's going to do is look at a website I'm looking at, so what? Doesn't matter. But obviously if it's going into my finances, it's a whole different thing. So, just thinking about how you manage that, again, what kind of example you set, what sort of position you put yourself in vis-a-vis the people that work for you is where I'm kind of advocating you should think about this pretty hard, because it is, to really start concluding, it's an incredibly important part of our lives these days. And having learned from personal experience this week, again, the vulnerability of suddenly a key device falling over being able to turn around and effectively keep the show on the road and keep moving forward is vitally important. So, think hard, have a reflection on yourself, turn around and go on the back of some of the stuff I've said. How good am I at this? What am I doing? Have I got all my stuff backed up in the right places? Have I got redundancy when I need to? Have I got a really good grip on, what I'm going to do if this falls over tonight, in an hour's time, tomorrow morning, etc. I would just advocate that you need to, to think about that. And then again, about the appropriate use and this kind of addiction point. When did you last do a digital detox, as it were? When did you last take yourself off the material that we often get completely hooked into? And just give yourself a good look in the mirror and a bit of self-reflection on that, because I think it's useful practice for all of us to do. That's kind of what I wanted to say. Hopefully, by the time I do the next one of these podcasts, I'm going to be at least getting closer to having a nice new shiny computer to work on. Although I suspect that might be a bit beyond the next podcast. So we'll have one more coming off this kind of means in the meantime. But I hope you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening as ever, and all feedback greatly appreciated as ever. All the best. Bye now.